We are live.
So, hello everyone. Welcome to another episode of Selected Tech. This time we're gonna do something really special. We're streaming live instantly to YouTube and Twitch. Yeah, we wanted to switch around stuff, make it more interactive. Because it's the first time we didn't advertise it, but next time be sure to watch, to look, to interact with us. Because yeah, since it's live, we can see the comments immediately instead of afterwards. So today we're gonna do a special treat because Tommy's gonna do getting started with Blazor for Teams development. Which, if you follow one of us, then you at least know that Tommy already did an example for that for the PMP team. So of one of the Office Dev podcasts, it was something like that, and it looked really promising. So this time we have a little bit more time, so we're gonna go a little bit deeper into that. So Tommy, take it away.
Perfect. So I share my screen and let me start with the first thing. Um, Getting started with Blazor in Teams, basically what you are building on top of is called TeamsFx, and there is a GitHub repo under github.com Office Dev TeamsFx where you see the actual code or parts of it, because the Visual Studio parts are not all open source. But first steps first, this whole TeamsFx thingy is basically the Microsoft Teams framework. TeamsFx sounds a lot like SharePoint framework with the shortcut here. And what it actually does is it's two different things. It's a part for Visual Studio Code, so based on JavaScript and Node development, and a part for Visual Studio with .NET development and Blazor behind it. If you look through this repository, I think all the parts for Visual Studio Code, so the JavaScript world, is already completely open sourced. The Visual Studio parts are not totally open source because parts of it are really code from Visual Studio, and they're not allowed to publish that part of their framework generator, F5 experience, whatever you want to call it. But they're thinking of making more and more things accessible also in the .NET world. For example, sample files, new project files, all those kind of things that would be really interesting, because this is really like the first public preview. We're in a very early stage. It's not generally available yet. There's no major release yet. There's no official support, but already we'll see later around 50,000 downloads for the framework stuff on JavaScript and around 3,500 downloads for the parts in Visual Studio. But you can read here in details what the teams describes, what are the difference. Important also, there's an issue list where you can see different problems, bugs, feature requests, just GitHub issues. And the team actually is pretty engaging and giving feedback and explaining things and roadmap, or explaining the roadmap and giving hints about errors. So that's also a good idea to make sure to check out the issue list and get in touch with the team and give them the feedback they need to make this actually a proper tooling, and hopefully soon G8. I have no idea when they plan to G8 to make that generally available. That's the Microsoft jargon, sorry for that. But as we all know, those things are typically something they want to announce at big conferences. The next one is Ignite. So I would guess that it will be around Ignite time frame that this will released, or later. I've again really no idea, but that would be my guess. If you want to start with the Visual Studio part, there's actually nothing you can download here. What you need to do is you need to open up Visual Studio, and let's go back and just continue without code first. And then under extensions, click on Manage Extensions and Online, and search for Teams. And then you have the Teams Toolkit. You don't need this Microsoft Teams app thingy. That's the old one. That's the I think 1 or 2 years old experience. Really, what we are looking for is Teams Toolkit. Still preview. And you see here we already have 3,880 installs. The version number, that's the thing you want to install. You click on install, and then it's this normal behavior from Visual Studio components or extensions or plugins. You need to close Visual Studio and reopen it. And if you start with that, then you can create something like this. Create a new project. And then you have Microsoft Teams app here. And basically what you're creating now is a Blazor server-side application. You only have the option of server-side, not client-side at the moment. That's the first thing. Let's call that, select that tech sample. Yeah, solution is okay. And then first interesting part, application name and developer company. If you're familiar with the Teams manifest, you already can make a connection here. Those two fields are also something you need to provide in Teams manifest. So let's make that, select that tech sample Teams app. And first input from my side, it's small over here. A short name, 30 characters should be provided here, because this actually is in the short name property of the Teams manifest. If you go crazy here with your characters, you will get an error later on, and there is no check here. So I made the mistake already, created like a nice, extending 30 characters long title, and my app wasn't deployable. And then with the bug fixing or bug hunting in the manifest, I realized, okay, that's too long. It says here in the description, but there is no check actually here. Company, same thing. It's used in the manifest. Oh, not selected teach, but also interesting. But let's stay with selected tech. We create that, and now the scaffolding part takes place. So Visual Studio now creates a new project. If we go to the Solution Explorer, you already see here a couple of files, a couple of folders. We will have a closer look in a second, but it already starts with the getting started text file that guides you now through the next steps. And what this example or what this new project template is all about, that you can get up to speed pretty quickly, and what Microsoft is calling this F5 experience. This press F5 and everything is good, meaning F5 to start the debug session here. And what you need to do actually is that you need to go to select the project TeamsFx configure for SSO, so single sign-on menu, because with the extension we have a new entry here, TeamsFx, and you can click on configure for SSO. I will do that now. And in my environment, I'm already connected to my developer tenant, and it only took a couple of seconds. And you see here, registered application under TGO Dev. That's my Office 365 developer tenant. Client ID, identifier, tab endpoint, or authority, Teams ID, and allowed app IDs. So behind the scenes, what already happened, the project now talked to the Teams developer portal and registered a Teams app there, and already also talked with the Azure AD tenant and created an application there also, got back the different GUIDs and set up everything. So from here, I should be good clicking debug or pressing F5. Might be the case that I need to log in into the tenant again. Let's see. No, thank you. Yep. Give me a second, because I'm not using IE, of course, but only for the development stuff. And I really don't know my passwords.
we all don't.
No, that's no chance. So, no, that was the wrong. Next one. Copy the password, and I'm pretty sure it wants a multi-factor token as well. Yep.
Yeah, the joy of authenticating.
Yeah, I have a PowerShell demo also for authenticating and using that stuff. So I need to make sure that this is working. So I'm not. I don't want to disable. That's the word. Disable this from that account, because I will need it again. But I just need to find it in my list. Here we are. And as it is a free tenant, I need to provide a token, because all the paid ones actually I can tap on my phone or on my watch, but not if you the free Azure Active Directory tier. So back in Teams, might be the case that we need to refresh that because it took a little bit long maybe. Let's see. So it already opens up the install blade or install environment from my application. So apps, and up there it provided an app ID, and I can now click add. And I have my tab here, and I have my sample running.
Oh.
So if you already configured all the things, it really is takes you 2 or 3 minutes to get started with a new application up in Teams. I'm going to stop that now and walk you through the things that happened behind the scenes. First interesting part is what account actually was used. How do you know that, and how do you change that? That's a tough one. You can click again, configure for SSO, and then you see here that it's using this account. And if you click on F5 or configure for SSO in the first time, it actually asks you for an account, and it stores that account somewhere in the Visual Studio folder in a cache file. So to get rid of that account, you have 2 options. You uninstall the extension and reinstall the extension, or you get rid of that folder. That's the part of the not general available feature. They're working on a sign out thingy, but it's baked in the thing, and I changed that for the PNP demo actually, because 2 hours before the PNP demo I realized that I cannot share my other tenant because it's in the beta rings, and there is stuff in there that we're not allowed to share, and I needed to move to my developer tenant. And in a panic move, I actually deinstalled the extension and reinstalled it, and it worked. But a couple of days later, I saw a post that it's in the Visual Studio Hive somewhere. There's a folder with your extension, and if you get rid of that folder, then you get rid of the cached credentials, and then it asks you again, because there's no way to log out of the tenant. And it's they were thinking of using tenants from up there, but this tenant or this ID actually isn't part of my Visual Studio credentials, so it really is stored somewhere else. That's the first thing. I should have prepared. Yep, here we are. The developer portal from the tenant. You see here there is the entry for our application. You can download the app package, duplicate it, and that's very important because there is documentation out there how to move that thing to production, how to deploy it, and the idea from the early stages was that you click publish here, and my feedback was like, okay, that's fine for a developer tenant, but I don't want to publish to a production tenant straight from Visual Studio. That's not the way I think, and I guess you guys agree with me. That's not the thing or the way the things work. So they are still working on a better experience to publish it to an app service, for example. So what I do at the moment is that I download the manifest, and in the production environment I create the app registry by hand, change the IDs, and then I make a deployment by myself. But they're working on an experience that you really can also use publish from Visual Studio, and also, and hopefully they will do that also, DevOps chains to make releases and builds and pipelines, and to make sure that it's like a proper development experience. So we saw that in the application center there. Let's check the other interesting part in Azure.
Just a great opportunity for the CLI. We could use the CLI to download these packages,
absolutely,
use some form of formatting, and then upload them again.
Yeah, make that a publishing option. I thought about that already. Changing IDs. So you also see in my Azure environment, select the text sample. We have the IDs here, and everything is configured. That's interesting because you see that the the tool creates an entry here. It creates something in Azure Active Directory, so the account that you're using should really have a lot of permissions actually to make sure that this works. That's also something that I'm not sure that every developer out there is allowed to make those kind of adjustments in a production tenant. They should be good with, like I'm using now my developer tenant, but please don't tell me that you can make that thing in production so easy. That's also, you see that they are more in a phase of making things work, and then getting idea of really make that more enterprise ready. Yeah. That's the euphemism for make it secure and stable, I guess. Interesting part is that if we go back to the solution here, what we actually get here is a Blazor server-side application with typical structure here. So we have typical Blazor parts with a program, a startup, app definition, imports, and our pages. There is this tab here, and actually that's the page that we're gonna serve in Teams, because we also have here under properties our manifest, and that's actually the Teams manifest. So that is what was created during our configure for SSO, our first deployment. You see here again, short name, something that we used in the wizard, and from now it just takes the website URL from our local host, because we are running this locally, and Teams is just iframing our local host into it. So that's how it works. That's how debugging works. And of course, if you think of making it production ready, you will change those URLs hopefully, because localhost won't be that good of an idea in the production environment. Down there you see also config URL and then tab URL. Of course, you can add multiple tabs there also. You just from here now, the experience right now is that the template or the new project wizard creates those initial files, and from there it's your job to create another tab. There's no UI, no config part of that, but you can of course just add another entry here. I think you're allowed to have 16 static tabs in an app definition or something like that. So there's just place for more. Also configuration. Maybe the config part is something for our probably an extended session, so not for today. But from the tab part, we go over here, and then you have your tab razor file. And if I start the application again, you see here the ID installed app package, and then it switches over to the installment URL. Click on add again, and that's something that gets annoying pretty quickly, because you need to install the app all over again. Right now, because we are still using Visual Studio 2019 and .NET 5 with that, I didn't had the time and I didn't tried it yet, but there is a comment in the issues that you can use Visual Studio 2019 to create your solution and create your configuration for SSO, then close the solution, open that up with Visual Studio 2022. What is it? The other version? 22? We check. Yeah. And then from there you can use hot reload of .NET 6. So that would be easier and better in the future, because then you don't need to install the thing all the time. You just need to click hot reload, and then your changes are there in a couple of seconds.
Yeah, it's weird that they do that, because if you do a change to the manifest, then I can imagine you need a new version installed. But if you don't do that,
if you need to make a change to the manifest, actually, good question. There's also a button here for update the manifest file. Okay. So you really need to update it, because if you I tried it, if you only change the manifest file, nothing happens. It seems like only the update button here really triggers the sync to the dev portal, and there is then in your folder there is a local and a remote manifest folder somewhere. So they just keep that in sync there. But back to the example, because what we have here is just a demo image, and already the thing knows my name. So the ID token already got parsed. It already greets me. The interesting part is that when I click on authorize, it actually makes a graph call. First time, new Azure AD application. It wants, of course, my consent. I'm global admin, I can accept that. And then we get back the response of a graph call. What happened behind the scenes? And that's the real interesting part, because if you're new to Blazor, first of all, Blazor is a combination of the words browser and Razor. Razor files, a type of markup already used in .NET 3.1 or something like that. Not sure about that, but basically what we end up doing is that we have C# code in our front end, and you see here HTML markup mixed with C# instead of JavaScript. In the end of the day, of course, it will create JavaScript and HTML, but during development, you could use C# here. So this div, for example, if is loading, that's normal C# code. And then there is this button, authorize, and actually is just an on-click event, get user profile photo. And just let's have a look, because it's down there in the Razor component. There's also a code part, and here we are. Get user profile photo. It just says graph client is TeamsFx, so library part. We will have a look in a couple of seconds into it. Get graph service client, and photo stream is just graph client me photo content. So that's the normal .NET SDK, and that's it. You have then your profile, and of course you need to read it and interpret it in the proper way, make that an image, and off you go. That's all what you need to do. Behind the curtains, it's a little bit trickier, because in the first time, you see here on after render async, if first render, so the very first time and only at the first time, this method actually gets triggered, I think 3 or 4 times in a page refresh. But for the first render, it actually creates a TeamsFx component. And you see here, TeamsFx create Teams JS runtime. So what the team actually created is you have a wrapper component, basically. That's this TeamsFx class here that acts like a wrapper of the Teams JavaScript SDK inside of your Blazor application. In Blazor server, you can interact, or also with Blazor WebAssembly, you can interact with the browser and with JavaScript files through JavaScript interop and different ways of calling JavaScript methods from .NET, or also calling .NET methods from JavaScript. But what they created is this class over here, TeamsFx, and you see, it's just the file is just dropped in the project and reused that way. That's for sure a sign or indicator that they are not 100% at production ready, because I assume this will just be a service inside of the normal .NET Core behavior, and not just a file that is this pushed into the project. But from now, you just create this TeamsFx environment with your JavaScript runtime. The JavaScript runtime is basically a service that gets injected by Blazor itself, so it's nothing Teams specific. But from there, configuration, get value, so you get the client ID that creates basically your wrapper component. It initializes it, and it's the same thing, or it's not 100% the same thing, but it's the very same way that you also initialize the JavaScript SDK, because you also need to click, or you need to call Microsoft Teams.initialize in JavaScript, and then you can go from there. And you see, if you already initialize it and get info async, you already have the ID token, because it's the first part of the SSO handshake. You get the ID token. So that's why we already saw my name before we actually clicked on authorize, because with that, we then call the graph service client. And if I stop debugging now, and let's have a look in there, you see graph service client, and then access token, get authentication token. Go to definition. It's then await module evoke async, and this module invoke async basically is the JavaScript interpretability. So there is a JavaScript method called GetToken that actually gets the token and hands it back to the Blazor part, and it for sure is somewhere here because this also gets provided by the new project scaffolding, all the things you need for authentication. And I think it's TeamsFx here. You see here, get token, and then again, new TeamsFx, but this is already the SDK on the JavaScript side. You see scoping here, credentials, and then I get it back. And if you open up this TeamsFx SDK JS, yeah, you see that this is like, this is where the magic happens. That's like, yeah, 5,000 lines of code and all the things you need for making this basically work. So that's something that it's interesting because this is like the hardcore version, and then you have a smaller, more consumable, more readable JavaScript file that you can make sense of with reading it at first. And my guess is that like, okay, mess with this file, but don't touch the other one, would be my interpretation of this setup. But that's it basically. And the interesting part is then how do you actually make your own calls to graph? Pretty easy, because you have the .NET SDK here, and then you can call whatever you want. As soon as you create a request here, for sure it will fail. Why? Because your application only has a certain scope configured. So when you, I think I have an example where I list all the teams of a user, then you need to go back to Azure Active Directory and add a scope to your application. Otherwise, it will get back from graph with not allowed or access denied because you don't provide the proper scope, because in the first iteration it's just user read, so you can get the picture back from the beginning. But from there, basically you can take that to create Teams applications, and pretty easy, I assume. One more tip, if you start with it, it happens that or we can actually show that as well. Let's make a breakpoint in the get user profile here. Yep. And then going back to the browser, and I click on authorize, and you will see I can debug immediately. I can step through, it's no problem. And the interesting part is, let me open up the browser again. Normally, if you debug and you have your normal web application environment and you have a local instance running, you keep pressing F5 to refresh also in the browser. That's not a good idea over here, because you see here, your application basically is just an iframe in that environment. If you press F5, you would reload the Teams experience. So what you need to do actually is click this button over here to refresh. Now, of course, the Blazor application is giving up because I'm stopping the server, holding the server, so the signal R connection says now, okay, I'm running in a timeout. But if you keep on debugging and keep changing things, don't press F5 as you're used in normal web development. Make sure that you click on this refresh button here, because this refresh button only refreshes the iframe. Pressing F5 basically destroys your debug session. You need to go back to Visual Studio, click F5 again or press F5 again and install the application again, because you lose that connection then. Happens all the time to me. Yeah. That's it from a very first perspective.
Interesting approach that it takes like 5 minutes to get started and have a C# project running in Teams.
Yep.
Or at least that's my feeling.
Can you do me a favor? can you
Of
look at
course.
the Nuget packages?
Yeah,
Because
sure.
that's the only thing I always have a problem with. If you use those Visual Studio stuff, it gets
Sure thing.
updated, and then how many updates do you need? Only 2. Okay, that's still doable. Because yeah, you have those
Yeah.
with normal .NET. It was like, okay, this template is now 6 months old, and then
That's
everything was
true.
running way behind.
But the interesting part is this one. This is the TeamsFx simple off. That's
Hmm.
basically I don't know what exactly is in the Nuget file, but I'm guessing that all those things, or I'm not 100% sure what comes from the Nuget file and what comes from the actually Visual Studio project template, where you also define files that get copied over when you create a new project. But I assume that some of parts came from that Nuget package. The rest, I think if you upgrade Graph, it would make no difference. You might end up with a breaking change in terms of how the Graph client gets created. I think there's like 12, 14, 15 methods or constructors. Pretty sure because
Yeah, it keeps on
let
changing.
us go back again to that. Go to definition. Yeah, you see here, basically it's a delegate authentication provider.
Yeah.
So basically you create a Graph client and tell the system, wait a second, I already have a token for you. So that's something I guess that won't change that soon, or if ever, because that's something you need to hand off authentication to another part and just say, hey Graph, I have the token, here we go. I think that's pretty solid and won't change. So from them part, I'm pretty sure you can
No, you can update
update
that.
easily. Interestingly enough, this Microsoft Fast Components Fluent UI, that was a first time I saw that, and there's already an update here, because what this is a Blazor wrapper for Fluent UI stuff. So Fluent button, Fluent progress ring, and for me it was like, okay, this is yet another version of Fluent, but now in .NET, or at least that's my understanding.
That makes it, yeah.
Yeah, but it's just the combination of C# and HTML and Razor is so powerful, because for Razor you can easily create your own templates, meaning that, for example, you see here this tab Razor file. First of all, it has a CSS file that's just scoped to this Razor component. So you have CSS scoping. You don't have this one, or you can of course create one large site CSS, and it's in there something as well. But for the components, you just make that inline in Visual Studio with a small CSS file that is scoped to your component, and you can easily just take parts of this let's say this div here, create a new Razor component, call it your own tag name, and reuse it in different parts, because it's not something that we will explore now, but you can make that application, or you can make a solution where you have let's say a Teams project, a regular web app. No, for sure not. For sure not. A regular web app, and with .NET MAUI that's coming, also maybe a Windows desktop application, an Apple, an iOS application, or an Android application, and then you have a Razor class library where you basically, like in the old days, you have your DLLs, and you have all your UI stuff and all your logic in the Razor component, and then you just reuse it through the different projects and in one solution. That's already out there. If you look at the what's it called, .NET Blazor or .NET 6 community hours on Twitch, they already have examples out there with Blazor in the desktop, Blazor in iOS, Blazor on the Apple Watch, on Android, and those examples. And I'm just waiting for this extension to be also available in the new Visual Studio version. Should be with the GA of Visual Studio was the remarker in the issue list. And then we could create something that runs in Teams and runs on your phone and runs on the desktop using the same markup and the same code here. And that's really powerful.
Cool.
Yep.
Definitely cool stuff.
That's it, yeah.
We should do more with it.
We should.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In a way, I'm still doing TypeScript stuff. So.
Yeah, I can only read TypeScript. I cannot write TypeScript.
Yeah.
It only works in one direction for me, apparently.
You guys are so lucky. I just need to talk the entire day.
Yeah, as a company owner, of course.
Yeah.
Okay.
Cool.
I think
Well,
that's
looks
it
like
for today.
Yeah, it looks like the technology kept up with us so far. I had a private browser running with the YouTube stream on mute, but so far it looks good. Not too bad.
Perfect.
Yeah,
Perfect.
Cool.
Then
Not too
I
bad.
click, let's say bye-bye, thank you. I click on end broadcast.
Thanks.
And we will
Bye.
Thank you.
Say bye-bye to
So-
I
everyone.
wonder what happens when you click end this broadcast.
we will see now.